working to ensure that in using the CMS, that what is possible to what is required is possible to achieve, as a result, basically what we're focused on today is the admin job stories, but also anything that are persistent kind of frustrations with the current CMS, any areas that we think it can be improved, and any opportunities to reduce existing manual processes that exist within that CMS. So we've got the list of job stories on the agenda, but this is also going to be fairly freeform in just in terms of asking those using the CMS and editing what their approach is and how they, what their kind of key considerations are with it. Alex, you put together kind of the agenda for this, so I think it's probably best to kind of hand over to you as to where you'd like to start.
So I guess, as I said, there's kind of a set of job stories that we've put together, and we've obviously shared this now, so it'd be great to get feedback, I guess, from the whole team, everyone that's using the CMS after the session that we do today. I think probably where we're best putting our attention for the time being would be the kind of those sort of two questions that we've asked ahead of the job stories. What we're talking about is, firstly, if there are any sort of persistent niggles or frustrations or things that are tricky to do that could be made easier when using the current CMS. We kind of get all kinds of responses to questions like that. Sometimes things aren't updating properly, sometimes it's difficult to use images, things like that. And then secondly, whether there are any opportunities to reduce kind of manual editorial processes. Other things, there are processes at the moment that just feel like they take longer than they should, and there's the potential to streamline them with the use of a CMS. So I guess it makes sense to jump into the first one first. For people who use the CMS on a regular basis, are there any frustrations with it as it currently stands?
Hello. Yeah, Nick, I guess we're gonna be heavily reliant on your input in this one, as you appear to be the only journalist on the call. Yeah, unfortunately.
Sorry, Nick, at that point, are you happy that you are here alone, in the sense that should I grab Anna for half an hour? I mean, would that make sense or not?
She sent me some points.
Fine.
Anyway,
Okay,
that's all good. Unfortunately, I couldn't get input from Shakina or Anna or Paloma because Paloma's off sick and Shakina's off. So I'll try and get some input from them. But from my perspective, there are a few bits and pieces. I think the really key things, is graphics and tables. Obviously, being being financial publications, being able to put together tables, being able to put together kind of tabular graphics is really important to sort of make our numbers to make numbers sort of stand out, to make the data stand out. And the CMS, we find it really difficult to create tables in the CMS. So I think that's the key one, and any kind of that kind of way to build, as I said, tabular graphics and to show that the data like that would be that's the first thing, I think. The second thing is being able to input videos into stories. We find quite difficult. And obviously, I've only used this particular CMS for about 4 months now, but I'm getting feedback from others. There are little glitches which I won't go into, but things like I'll sort of park that and put that and talk about later. Sort of the bigger things. Being able to schedule stories is not particularly easy, so that's a good one. That's something we want to look at. I think update on SLS in particular, we have a carousel, and I know Anna said to me that it's quite difficult to update that carousel. So, and I think the same goes for, and I did. It was on. Jamie asked me yesterday to do your mortgage, and updating that carousel is not particularly user friendly either. I had to go through the back end and put the numbers in and so on. So that's also not the easiest point in the world. So that's sort of video, graphics, carousel, scheduling stories, and then what I'll do is when Paloma and Shakina get in next week and Anna's around, what we'll do is put together a list of the more glitchy stuff. And by glitchy stuff, I mean, for example, when we want to do like long dashes or end dashes in on the page, we can't do that. We have to go into Word, do it, copy it over, put it back in, because it won't give us that M dash or M dash.
Okay, so there are aspects of this that are going to be straightforward and aspects that are going to be less straightforward. and N dashes and M dashes in particular are ones that in web encoding you do need a special character for quite a lot of the time. But we could try and work out, Alex, some kind of shortcode add-on that allows a click to add one in from the toolbar, maybe something along those lines. But to just be able to type one is
yeah, or standardizing the shortcode perhaps might be something that we can do. I'll look into that.
Some of these things are controlled by web browsers is the issue.
Yeah.
Like, I understand there might be kind of WordPress issues and so on. So I wouldn't, I mean, we don't want, it's going to change the world of coding, but like that's when I'm talking about sort of small glitchy stuff.
Yes,
carousel, videos, graphic stuff.
Yeah.
We can put together a short list of things and send those over. But those are the main things. It's really just the tables, the graphics, video, the carousels, and these sort of glitchy points. I think the other thing is, and this is more to do with what the front end is going to look like afterwards, and that's obviously not got a huge amount to do with me, but one of the things that would be good, particularly because, obviously we're very, very news focused, is being able to show, because, okay, in many ways, a lot of our stories, when we put them on MS or Your Money, yes, they always, there's no kind of hierarchy. There's no hierarchy of where things are. So what's our biggest story? What's our exclusive? What's our latest? It's quite blocky. So I suppose when things change over from the back end, we'd like to be able to sort of say, right, here's where we can, drop in our latest story, our exclusive, our main story. So you've got more of a hierarchy of news as opposed to kind of what we have now. And that's, I suppose, a bigger discussion, but I don't know how that would work in the CMS as in then going forward, but that's the other thing.
Do you expect that to be a manual process, Nick? That okay, today's biggest story is X, or is it going to be a timed process or something else?
No, it would be. So let's say you have on your site, you would have a bigger block, smaller, so news in briefs, kind of blocks, things like that. So
I like how the BBC kind of does it. There's always one thing at the top, right?
Yeah. So it would be, I mean, I know we do it. We can do it. It's sort of there, but it would be better if we. So we've got, for example, we've just put out an exclusive story this morning. So it's ours, and it's sitting basically next to 4 of the stories. And yes, we've got the exclusive strap on it. But what we'd like is to go, like, look at this. And
like when the Queen dies, or when Ukraine gets invaded, and this sort of thing,
exactly.
On the BBC, they put a big banner at the top that is effectively, this is the big story, and it's bigger than the ones you'd usually see in this headline.
Yeah, this is your A story, but that's
this is your A story, and it's kind of a banner event as opposed to just your average news day.
But that's not. I mean, that can be something that if and when we're going forward, we decide that's what we want to do on the front end. It's just something to look for in the CMS that we can say, right, we're putting it into here. But that's just maybe for another time.
I think there's this is a question for us, Alex. It's a question about the elegance of different solutions for selection of these as well. I can picture it, for example, that you pick. I'm on the BBC right now, so I've got Labour hold seat in Sunak's first by-election test as the big story. Now, what tends to happen with that big story is that sooner or later something else will come in and replace it later in the day. Now, the question to some extent is, what's most elegant? Is it most elegant for someone to checkbox, that's the big story, and then subsequently for someone to checkbox that something new is the big story, and there can only be one big story at a time? Or is it archived as the big story, and effectively the newest big story is always the one that presents? There's some kind of elegance in the logic here, I think, that we need to just unpack a bit from our side, Alex, as to what's best.
Yeah, there's loads of different ways of doing it, whether you're doing it on a I think the reality of it is, given that you've got obviously a homepage that deals with the homepage, but you've also got sort of topic landing pages, right, as well. So you've got the next level down. And I think, given that you would want some degree of dynamism to that layout as well, you don't just want to be able to call out your A stories on the homepage. You want to be able to call them out, on, if we're looking at your money, on the retirement page, for example, the top level retirement page.
Yeah.
You want to be able to call out the top stories there as well. So realistically, what we're talking about probably is something done on a modular basis, Craig, where you're basically saying you have a module on the page for retirement and for the homepage, and you pick which posts you want to go in it. So it's going to be your featured story module, and you pick which post you want to appear in that. Is probably the way you would need to do it, rather than sort of just a checkbox within the post, which then displays it in certain places, because that would actually, I think, in longer term, become a more complicated way of managing it. But I don't want to sort of specify solutions at this point. We'll have a play around with it when we've got sort of designs and decide what the most sort of manageable way is going to be of looking after that stuff.
Sorry, that was slightly off the point. I mean, yeah, this is not about CMS. I mean, as much as it would be about CMS when it happens. But yeah, I mean, I'll leave you with the other stuff. Those are really all my points about the CMS.
Okay, I want to pull a few of them apart a little bit then. We'll start with video. No, let's start with graphics and tables. There's a few different ways that we can approach this. There are solutions that we can make use of for the creation of tables, where basically you will create a table in the CMS. It will give you a short code, and then to put it on a page, you just put that short code on the page. That's a pretty straightforward way of looking at it. What I'm interested in, though, is what different types of data viz you might want to make use of. So, for example,
and probably the complexity of them.
Yeah. So I can give you an example based on something that we've done for another client. They basically said, they came to us, they're a fertility clinic, and as a consequence, they have a lot of different figures that they have to show for each of the treatments that they offer. They have to show success rates, they have to show failure rates, things like that. And there are a few different ways that they wanted to lay this data out. They wanted to do pie charts, they wanted to do bar charts, they wanted to do tables, and they wanted to do a sort of a headline number. We kind of worked with them to understand what they would be, their ways of visualizing the data. I'm interested, obviously, you mentioned tables as the first thing. Are there any other kinds of things, any other types of sort of data visualization that you think you'd make use of if you could?
Yes. So effectively, everything you just said, pie charts, bar charts, graphs, fairly standard, just standard issue tables, which we do anyway, but we mostly just cut and paste them from places and then just kind of wedge them in there. So there's no kind of functionality to it, really.
Yeah.
I think you would want also kind of big, almost pull quotes as well, but like pull figures, so something pulled out, here's our big number, which then directs you to that. So all of those, I mean, it's not going to be hugely overcomplicated, but it would be good to do all the kind of standard graphics you can do, like, as you said, pie charts, bar graphs, etc., plus pull figures.
Okay, so
and standard tables. So all of that would be useful.
So we're looking at something. So this is a set here. So you've got a standard figure without any graphic.
Absolutely.
You've got a bar, a pie, and then you've got a bar next to it. So something like that is probably what we're looking for.
Yes.
A set like that. Plus, as we say, tables.
Okay. I know there are sort of instances where tables are supplied, or infographics, or kind of image-based tables are created by our design guy internally or supplied by clients, and the editorial team try and sort of inject those into article pages, but there's always difficulty around the rendering, the stretch, the responsiveness of those.
It's difficult. What do you mean when you say inject?
Well, like, you know, import a PDF of a infographic into the article page that's got a very kind of prescriptive size within it.
This is the thing. I think with stuff like that, you're always better off, I think, annoying as it might be, re-inputting the data to make a table that is actually code-based rather
almost certainly. I think the question to some extent is, and this, just to highlight this, these different aspects. Firstly, the extent you go to with these and the breadth of them can have a material impact on the cost of the project, naturally, because the different extents of tables and infographics and what have you, you can go a long way with the considerations there. But secondly, there's nothing to stop you starting out with a set of solutions and then adding to them over time. Nothing to stop us, starting out with the ability to create a certain complexity of infographical table in CMS, and then 6 months from now, well, actually, we've had a few instances of this. Can we make that in a slightly more elegant coded solution? What I'm using as reference here, and we spoke about this when we did the UI meeting. I'm just going to share my screen. So we've got our friend Martin Lewis, who is in this central window, so ignore the rest of the stuff on the page. They have an awfully wide variety of solutions here. So this is an article page in their news section, and they've got a 3-column table there, which is kind of styled specifically for them and is in code. I can select and copy these figures. That's not an image. This is an infographic, but that is an image.
Yeah.
You've got a pull quote there, which is just a standard module, but then otherwise that's normal. You've also got other things. So this is their email. This is literally a replication of their HTML email, which is partly why it's in such a narrow column. But similarly here, you've got tables, but they're quite different in their styling because of that email replication there and how they've done that. Now, we haven't discussed that as a user story at any point, replicating of the weekly email or the email newsletters in code on the site, but it is possible to do. This HSBC one has got obviously this set of tables here. That's practically the same as the other one, except that it is slightly different in terms of how it's actually been put together, visually speaking. This one obviously has this style of header for some reason, and that was different. It's about, to some extent, the breadth and the extent of how you go here. This one, for example, you've got a 2-column table with an image in one of the columns. There's a huge variety of different things you can do. Different types of pull quotes here. And to some extent, it's about how far you'd like to go. Alex, I'm conscious that it may well be outside of our remit on this to determine, based on user and job stories alone, how the content in each article should be styled and the breadth of those solutions. It may well be something for the editorial team to say, well, we want to have articles that look like this and this and this and this, and then maybe we advise as to how to amalgamate some of those, as opposed to being prescriptive with the ones we design. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
Craig, that's what I was going to ask. How do we get to a point of us sort of demonstrating to you how wide we want to go? I mean, is it a question of getting some examples fired over?
It's probably it probably is a question of that. I think though that it's a really fine balance to strike, and I think interestingly enough, Craig, the 2 different examples that you just shared there of the headings for the tables kind of illustrate this point.
Lack of consistency.
Yeah. So on the one hand, we want to be giving you the flexibility to do anything that you want to do. In an ideal world, we're giving you a thing and you can put new heading styles in, you can do whatever you want to do and achieve everything you want to do. On the other hand, that is necessarily and inevitably going to introduce a lack of consistency across the presentation. So it's about finding where that line is. So that example that Craig just shared there, what you've got is that someone's got a table solution in the CMS. That table solution has a field for a header. And when you use that field for the header, it puts it in on that blue bar there. And someone's put it in like that. The other instance where the heading was above the table on the white background was because they've not used that field and they've just put a heading in elsewhere and then inserted the table underneath. So
you want it to be quite prescriptive, yeah? Otherwise,
I think this is
the
it.
editorial team on sort of content designers, they're creators, they just want to go in and have as an easiest job as possible in terms of the creation and unpacking of that story. Giving them too many choices or opportunities to get creative with how it looks is a dangerous thing, and actually you're perhaps going to be guilty of creating all of these bells and whistles which just sit dormant because no one uses them.
This is it. I think this is the way that we should be framing this conversation around is what do you need? Because on the other side of things, if we were to say, okay, well, we're not going to do graphs, for example, bar graphs, that would be prohibitive. And so we don't want to be sort of doing anything that's prohibitive, but we do want to be sort of setting the parameters for how things are displayed.
Yeah.
I think that what I would be inclined to do in terms of what we're giving for styling would be that set of kind of data viz layouts that we've talked about, and they will be fairly prescriptive. It's not a case of just saying I want to input this graph. It's going to say these are your fields, put these in and it will create the graph kind of thing. Pull figures and pull quotes, I think we've already talked about. They're fine. Heading styles, so obviously your page will have an H1, you need to be able to do H2, H3 within the body of the text as well, so we'll need to create them. Beyond that, and other things that we all obviously have like CTAs, I don't think that we want to be sort of suggesting too much more at this stage. And I think, Craig, you probably hit the nail on the head in that what we've got at the moment is that there is not enough. We know there's not enough, and we have identified some things that are going to move it in the right direction. I think until people get their hands dirty and start using it, it's going to be very difficult for people to know the kind of unknown unknowns of what might be possibly good. And I think that there is going to necessarily be a degree of iteration to that process. I think that's where I would feel most comfortable, but it's basically saying, okay, this is the toolkit. We'll lay it out and say, and the next stage is obviously going to be to design this up, right? So when we design it up, we'll design up effectively an article page that has everything on it. It's probably unlikely that that's going to be what it is, how it's used in the future, but so you can see what everything that can be made use of is. And then that might make it easier for the editorial team to look at that and say, yeah, that all looks great, but I'd love to have something that does this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to collectively, inevitably understand between us that we are unlikely to find them all, and that in time you'll want to add more. Because what you are saying there, Alex, is that we do that as part of design. Well, yes, but we should try to arrive at a full scope of these before we embark upon the projects, so that we have a full understanding of what we're developing in full. I think ideally we get an idea in the next couple of weeks from you guys, and just by looking at other sites and what have you, and then we design around those, and then if we have to make any amendments to the scope later down the line, at least they are fewer in number.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what we can do from like your money and from your mortgage and solutions and SLS perspective is with the teams, we can have a look back at stories and look back at what we have put in there and how we would have done it better and how we would have wanted to do it better, and B, look at stories and say, well, what could we have put in here that would make these stories stand out? And it won't be too difficult to do that, and then literally just send over it might just end up being exactly what we just said in this call. We would have had a pie chart here, or we would have had a better table here had we been able to do that.
Yeah.
Or we may look at things and go, like you said, are we ever going to use bar charts? Possibly not. Are we ever going to use graphs in that way? Possibly not. Or possibly we are, I don't know. But we'll do that in the next sort of couple of weeks, and then along with the kind of glitches list as well, and get those over.
Cool. That sounds great.
Some of this is just the amount of time, with something like a bar graph that it would take you to make.
Yeah.
When it gets to the article, if you're doing dozens a day,
We don't, I mean, like I said, we don't want all bells and whistles. We want simplicity, but we want because none of us are designers in that way. I mean, we just want the ability to put something that's visually appealing and shows it better than just a long list of bloody numbers, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Craig, Alex, when do you want to set a deadline for receipt of that so that it fits in with the other work that's happening?
I mean, we're aiming to get the discovery report now done in the next couple of weeks. So, I mean, how quickly can you, if we were to say end of next week, is that too tight a deadline?
If everyone's around now, then yeah, that's fine. I mean, because it literally won't be any more than what we've just discussed now, more or less. I mean, and it'll just be things we might have missed. So, yeah, I mean, I'll let Ian and Jamie know.
Yeah, let's set that for next Friday then, Nick.
That'd be ideal if possible. Yeah, I mean, if it's not, then it's not the end of the world. It's just we're keen to actually get everything we can into this output report for you. Yeah.
Can I just have a chat about video as well?
Yeah.
It's certainly something we're creating more of, and have been for several years. And the way in which we display it in an article, doesn't look great, but also how we connect associated videos with each other. So one of the kind of key commercial elements that we create is sort of video debates that we sponsor driven, which we film in a studio. These are normally sort of 20-25 minutes long. Obviously people don't sit and watch 20-25 minute videos online anymore. I think the average kind of view time for one of these videos is sort of 5-6 minutes. So what we do is we unpack them into sort of smaller chapters, edit them out into 4 or 5 chapters for each video, and we distribute each video separately, kind of unpacked with a bit of an article around it as well. But at the moment, it looks pretty crap when it's on the site. It's not easy to view the video in a nice way. It's injected through Vimeo that we use at the moment. But also the ability to link the chapters or display video within a sort of carousel, so that users, if they're watching chapter 1, can also access 2, 3, and 4 relatively easily without having to search through the CMS or on the site to find the associated content, which is ideally something we'd look to do. Plus, from an events perspective, usually with each of our events, on day 1, we will video all of the presentations and the workshops that are taking place, and distribute those on our YouTube channel at the minute. But I think, again, the ability to be able to display and link event-related video content would be helpful as well.
Yeah. So I think basically what we're talking about is that there's a couple of ways of looking at this, because one of the ways that I would, if I was watching a video, I would navigate to the next in the series. I would probably do it within the video frame. I think we need to obviously make sure that that's working correctly. Secondly, I think that we're talking about, as you said, maybe a carousel. It's effectively a related videos, or rather it's probably a video card within a related posts module, so that when you've got at the bottom of that, underneath that video, you've got something that says you might also like thing, but we need to make sure that videos are well presented within that carousel of you might also like, and that it's clear that they're videos. And I wonder whether there is a kind of series mindset when we're looking at chapters within a video. Is there something that we can do with an icon, or is there something that we can do with a bit part of the meta information on the description on the card that says this is part of the X series, for the series being the full 25-minute long thing.
I think it's also the way in which we display on the page is editorial will write up a sort of an intro to the video with a screenshot of the video as the main hero image, and then further down the page is a tiny little Vimeo button that contains the video. So it's not evident when entering into the story that it is a video, and click here to view it as kind of the hero.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that we'll sort of we would change up anyway, to be honest. But yeah, cool. Okay. Can we briefly talk about scheduling stories and the requirements that there are there? How does it work at the minute, other than not well?
Hang on, sorry, 1 second. I'll come back in. My internet's cracking up. Well, effectively, I think it's just a bit of a pain sometimes when you're scheduling stories to go. They don't go. There's just glitches. It's what, again, going back to those glitches in the system. Maybe we're using, and maybe it's an education thing. Maybe we're using it wrong. Maybe someone just needs to say, right, actually just do that instead. So it could be as simple as that, really, but it might be more complicated. I mean, personally, I haven't scheduled any stories to go like that because we're normally around, but I know that Anna and Shakina and actually Paloma as well, they've all said they've had some issues scheduling. Now, that could be that they've done it and it's just not gone out. It could be, human error. I don't know, but they said they've had difficulty. So again, I will get some more information from them and put that into that kind of long list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. It might, it could be any number of things. I mean, I'm half tempted to have a look at the function there because we've noticed a few errors in the console when we've got the site working on a local environment, and scheduling is one of those things that it's a function that is likely to throw up an error.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether there's something erroring there, which by dint of moving on to the latest versions and things like that, you'll probably clear up necessarily. But it's something that we'll look into, and we'll just make sure that we test thoroughly and kind of cover off when we're handing it over in a good level of detail.
Sure.
Nick, does this relate to embargoing stories as well? How does that work? Does that work effectively? Has that landed us in any hot water?
No. It's not. It's not that. Not since I've been around. It might have done it in the past. I don't know. But no, I think because we're normally around when embargo set up a story and say, right, we want it to go at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then when we press it, it will. It could. I mean, there could be a situation where something does go out, like that story this morning. That was set to go at 9. I was here, so I could edit it and send it out. But if we'd set it and it had gone last night, we'd have been in the shit. So it is something we need. It hasn't happened yet, but it is something that could happen. So we do need to be able to.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Fair enough. Great. Okay.
The only other thing was the carousels then. It sounds to me, from what you've been describing, that those are basically done on a page-by-page basis, and they're not pulling through in a smart way the posts. So you shouldn't be inputting content to a carousel. You should just be picking which posts are displayed in that carousel, and it does the rest. Really, have I got that right?
Yes, I mean, we haven't because we've got the carousel. I mean, I was looking at the example on like your mortgage yesterday when I was doing that, and it was kind of having to go in, cut and paste the the ID for that, then go to another widget, put it into there, and then go back and check that it's on that carousel. And I think it's just fiddly, and we just need to be able to automate that. And as you said, just be able to pick an article and go, right, that's going on that's going up the top, that's going on the carousel, rather than having to kind of cut and paste things into various areas.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. I'll have a dig around in the CMS and just check how you're actually doing that for the time being, and make sure we're not doing the same.
Okay. That sounds straightforward and achievable then. Are there any other kind of focuses you're keen to draw from the job stories, Alex?
No, like I say, I think if at the same time as you're thinking, Nick, about the kind of display, it would be great if you could sort of just cast your eyes down that list of things that we've said you'll be able to do. and see whether there's things that are missing. We've kind of a fair bit of work has gone into them. We've obviously chatted with the guys here, so you may well find stuff that you want to be able to do as well. The things that we've discussed already, adding in bar graphs, things like that, aren't on there yet. So it's worth bearing that in mind. But that's kind of basically a list of things that you'll be able to do when you're using the CMS. It's not necessarily exhaustive, but it'd be good to know if there's any things that you want adding in there.
No, I mean, the team will know more than I will. I mean, it's so, I don't want to waste anyone's time, money, or resource. So if I go and say, do we need pie charts, for example, and the team, I say, no, we never use pie charts. So I mean, I'll just knock that off because they'd know that better than I would. So I'll just, once I've talked to them, we'll have a meeting and I can start putting that stuff together.
Cracking.
Yeah, Nick, it's probably worth circulating those job stories around to the team, see what they think, see if anything's missing.
Everyone who was on the invite.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, who actually? Yes, because Anna and Shakina were okay.
Yeah, we've got Anna, Paloma, and yourself, Nick.
Yeah. I'll add Shakina on there as well because she was away this week, so she wouldn't have been in this meeting.
Gotcha.
Nick, what's your experience with creating photo galleries as well? Do you have any challenges? So we obviously, again, part of our events portfolio, for the awards ceremonies that we do, we push out picture galleries the day after the awards, which drive quite a large amount of traffic to the site as everyone wants to snoop around and see who was up to what and who won what. So we kind of unpack galleries for each of the events. They look awful. It's really not a great user experience when looking at them. And I don't know if they're a complete pain in the arse to do from an editorial perspective as well in terms of setting them up, which I think they probably are.
They are. I think I know that a lot of times Anna and Shakina setting those up for the events, and it does take quite a long time to do it. I've not had that much experience with them. What I would suggest though is, now that you've mentioned it, is we have a look at how in a sense, have a look at how other places do it and what places do it well, how we can make it look good. And then we go back to these guys and just say, we'd like to do it this way. Because there must be a way of making them look good, because right now they are kind of hokey, just looking through. So
Do you have an example of one at the moment?
There'll be one on. Let me see if I can find a link.
I think the last one was TM. Was it TMPE? Maybe. Yeah,
is there a mechanism? Again, I don't know. So we have an external photographer who obviously takes all of these photos. Nick, do you know how Rob sends them over to us? Does he dump them into the CMS?
No, as far as I know, they get sent over to Una or Lorraine, and then they come over to our side. So I don't know too much about it, to be honest. It normally just goes through Anna.
Craig, Alex, whether there's a mechanism of allowing the photographer to sort of dump photos.
There's always a mechanism. It could very much be a case of.
What standard practice is elsewhere.
Yeah, I could run through a couple of potential solutions. You can give them a CMS login, and they can just log in and have just access to that section. You can give them you can have WordPress hooked to a Google Drive or Dropbox or similar, and have it effectively pull the photos from there. You can have the Google Drive linked just to the CMS, so that if you wanted to approve certain images, you could. I think the best way of doing this is thinking, well, what is the problem we're trying to solve? That's how we've approached it so far, and what do we feel is the ideal solution for that? Because there's no, like Nick was saying, there's no sense in designing something that is all bells and whistles and never used. I think it's about let's try and solve the problem for now, and then if we find there are any other problems, we can always add to the solution later.
Yeah. No, again, and I'm coming about this from a place of not knowing what exactly the process is at the moment, but it feels as though photos go from photographer to another person here in the team and then get forwarded to editorial, which isn't very efficient. I mean, I know it's not a disaster, but it's...
The only thing I would say is that when people are uploading photos, you don't want any images in your media library that aren't anywhere on the site. Because you're just putting bloat in the database.
Yeah.
So if there is a degree of picking and choosing, if the photographer is giving you a Dropbox and then someone on the editorial team says, right, we're going to have picture 1, 8, 10, you don't want to put 2, 3, 4, etc. into the database, because there's no need for it to be there. Your database is just bigger than it needs to be. And managing database size is going to be one of our biggest considerations anyway. So I would say that if there is any degree of editing or selecting being done after the photographer has handed it over, then it makes sense for that to be done before the images interact with the media library.
Understood.
But in terms of, I'm looking at the gallery. We can make it a lot more interact. The biggest issue with that is that when you click on it and you get the modal, you can't then click through to the next image.
Correct. And the if you look at it on a mobile, it's just car crash.
Yeah.
And as we said before about other videos, there's also there's nothing to say there shouldn't be associated photographs from other events if people are in the mode of looking at photographs.
I think that ad might be breaking your mobile display.
We have on the galleries, there's a kind of slightly separate ad functionality in that we do an ad refresh every time someone clicks on a new picture. So we deliver an extra set of ad impressions for every picture that's opened up, which is a pretty good driver of ad impressions for us.
I think the problem is, I was checking it on my phone at the same time. It might not be something that we can do anything about, but if I share my screen, certainly what I'm getting in Chrome is this.
It's probably reading that you're on a...
It might be, that's why I'm just checking it on my phone.
Yeah, because we don't deliver landscape ads on mobile.
Okay.
It's probably reading your device, but not your viewport, Alex.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, no, it's fine on mobile, but it is still pretty difficult to look at those pictures.
I mean, if your thumbs are as fat as mine, trying to click through them is almost impossible.
Yeah. Okay. That's something to bear in mind. Cool. Okay. I think that's a good set of stuff. I think, it'd be great if we can get some a little bit further input from the wider team as well. And like I say, just making sure that list of job stories is as full as possible. That would be good.
I think it's probably something we talked about previously, but tagging of articles as well. Nick, I know that is a manual process.
Yeah.
To the minute. And the importance of creating some consistency around how we tag articles up. It is important.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've been thinking about a lot anyway, to be honest, and working out exactly how those tags are done. I think at the minute the tags are done on you type your tag in basis, whereas I think what we need to be doing is having a set of tags that can be added to, but is a list that you pick from when you're creating a post. So you're more likely to pick one that already exists rather than just typing it in and, you've got mortgages with a capital M and mortgages with a lowercase m and things like that.
Nick, also thinking about it in terms of the connection between WordPress and MailChimp from an email newsletter perspective. I'm not familiar in terms of the processes that the team have to go through in order to produce the content, which is then pushed through to the templates in MailChimp, and whether or not there's an opportunity to automate some of that or change the workflow so it's more efficient.
If we could automate that this is particularly on Your Money, because doing the Your Money newsletter into mail. Now, the issue is slightly, I don't know whether it's a MailChimp issue or a CMS issue. So with Your Money, you know, it is a very, very manual process. It's very blocky. You can't get, you know, if you do 10 stories in a day, you have to kind of space them out into each block. So it starts to look like a new story doesn't look like a new story effectively because we can't put it in there. Now, that might, I mean, we've talked to 93 Digital about this, but yeah, I mean, if we could automate that process, particularly on Your Money, but on both, that would be great. If we could just, you know, if you could literally just pull up the key stories.
Yeah, what is the process? Are they just generated based on time of publication, or can the editorial team go in and pick the ones they want to push to MailChimp? Or
that's what we do. So let's say, because I'm doing it, but let's take Your Money as an example. We do, because we only do one newsletter. You say, right, here are the latest 20 posts or 10 posts from today. I'd say, right, that's the one that's the biggest story, or Paloma would say that's one that's the biggest story, and click on that and then choose second, third, and fourth. And that would go in the top slot, which is, you know, I think it's, you know, news. And the next slot says more news. And then you just kind of click into, and then you find the next 4 stories that you like. Then the next one down says editor's picks. So then you put in that, and then you manually pick those. And then the next one down says most read, and then you manually pick those and put them in. So it's a long-winded process. It's very manual, and also there are times when you've got more stories and you can't fit them all in. So that becomes it was a bit of and it's the same with solutions as well. For example, if we were to do, like on the autumn statement, for example, do 25 stories in a day, we found that we couldn't fit all the stories in because it only let us put 20 in. Now, I think that issue might have been solved, but that's also something worth looking at as well. But yeah, automating it would be bloody brilliant, yeah, because it is a very manual process.
And I think also, whilst we're thinking about it, you know, the intention is in the medium to long term, certainly to be able to, on the consumer side, create more newsletters. So at the moment, as Nick said, we just push out one Your Money newsletter today, which is, you know, the day's top 20 stories or whatever. But actually, in order to create better user engagement, creating bespoke newsletters based on you know, the type of content that or the subject of the content that we're producing is key going forward. So rather than, you know, subscribing to the generic daily newsletter, you can subscribe to a weekly investment newsletter or a monthly newsletter. Yeah, that kind of stuff. And at the moment, we don't, other than manually going in and picking those stories, I don't think we have the ability to do that. But I think the feed between the CMS and MailChimp is just kind of one feed.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The idea of wanting to do different styles of newsletters. So, for example, if we wanted to send out, I mean, literally our newsletters are just headline, 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 click on them and go. If we wanted to create, as Jamie's saying, like if we want like a long read newsletter, if we wanted to send something out and say, right, here's a big old story, read this here, and then you can maybe click in and we put links to other stories in there. It's that kind of thing that we'd like to create. So yeah, that'd be great if we could do that. But like I said, it is very one-dimensional at the moment.
And the Your Money ones are going out daily at the minute, are they?
Yeah, they go out about between 4:30 and 5 every day.
Every day.
And Mortgage Solutions or SLS, it depends. Then there's 3 on those. So one sort of mid-morning time. Then there's a second one that goes about 3:30, and the final one about 5:30.
Okay, so that's a lot of time being put into them.
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll have to think about that. That could be an interesting thing to look at. Okay, cool.
Mortgage solutions are daily, and I think there's one at the weekend as well. So work day plus a Saturday kind of round up top 10 most read stories. Yeah. SLS, they do bi-weekly, so it's one newsletter on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and then I think Your Mortgage also has 2 a week, and then Your Money's every day, weekday.
Yeah. I suppose I'm finding it a little bit difficult to conceptualize what the automation would look like, and that's largely because of the frequency of them going out.
It strikes me, Alex, that it's effectively a checkbox per article that says this goes into the newsletter and is this type of story.
Yeah, but if it's going out daily, if that newsletter is going out daily, when is that check done?
It's always got to be immediate, isn't it? The second that it's published, it's pushed.
If it's published, it's pushed. But let's think about the top stories bucket where you got 4 articles.
Yeah.
How? There's a question for you, Nick. If something has been a top story on one day in a newsletter, can it be in a subsequent day?
We try not to, because simply, it could be a most read, if it's in that box. But what we try to do is keep those top stories. Your Money is the example, and Solutions as well. We would never have the same story going because it's just rolling news.
Yeah.
So every day, the biggest story. But the problem is we have to manually choose them because it's what we think is the biggest story.
Well, this is what I'm wondering. This is how do you automate that? It does seem like there does need to be some editorial oversight to it.
Oh, there does. I mean, it's effectively the top story will always be what we think I mean, obviously we'll write the subject line as well, and it's what we think will get most people to open. Obviously, most people to open the newsletter. It's not, this is the story we think people will click on, and that will always be our top story. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be all automated. Obviously, there will be there will be editorial input because there'll have to be. I mean, we'll have to check these things and so on from all points of view. But some level of automation or some level of just making it slightly simpler to do it rather than having to, because it's there's a lot of process involved. That's it. So you have to remove all of yesterday's stories and then go in and put all of the new stories on and then send it round. And then, all of that, I mean, a lot of that, I guess, will still have to be in there, and there'll have to be that editorial angles to it. But just if we could make it simpler.
I wonder whether what we're looking at is, in an ideal world, would be that each, lunchtime every day, there is a new email that's basically been set up, and based on best guesses, and those best guesses will be to do with things like what has it been tagged? Has it been tagged as a feature story? When was it published? Things like that. It will be populated already, and it will say, we think these are going to be we think these are the ones that are going to go into each bucket, and then you can sort of remove them. You can add new ones in if you want to. I think that bit which you just said about manually removing each one that feels like definitely unnecessary legwork, which we can iron out. But I'll have a play around with that and see what we can set up. It's just trying to get that logic right. I think.
Yeah, that sounds accurate, Alex. That's kind of how certainly how I see it. Because there does need to be editorial control at the end of the day.
Cool. Okay. We've got a couple of minutes left, and one of the things I always like to do at the end of these sessions would be to ask you, Nick, what if we were to then go away and disappear for 6 months, go away and build it, and then come back and we don't talk to you in the meantime? If there's one thing you want us to take away from it, that is a hypothetical, it's not going to happen, by the way, but if one thing that you wanted us to take away from this conversation that you really want us to sort out, what would it be?
Can I have 2 things?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, mate. I do think
you're not going to say Jamie and Ian, are you?
I do think the tables and graphics I think are important, because I really think being sort of a financial sites we need to have that, because our readers, especially on the mortgage side, they deal in numbers every day, and having that presentation of numbers is something that we really should be looking at. And also, I mean, all of it's important, but I think moving forward with the site, the video thing is very important. I think being able to present video properly on the site rather than doing the Vimeo links and so on. Yeah, I mean, because if we don't do that correctly, we're just going to look clunky in the future. So I think that is those two for me.
Right.
Okay, that's really useful. Cool. Just before we finish, I will talking to you again later, Jamie and Ian, but I just wanted to ask how you feel this process is going right now. Are you happy with the direction we're taking at this point? Are you satisfied with getting the kind of inputs and outputs we need for the project?
Yeah, I think so. Well, hopefully I'll speak for Jamie as well as Nick. We've found all of these sessions fascinating, and actually, it feels as though we're getting to grips with understanding hopefully you're understanding each element of the project and our requirements and how all of the components sort of sit together, really. But yeah, from our perspective, it feels as though we are exploring what we need to explore and really lift the lid on the detail, really.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, always keen to check it sort of at least a few times during this process, because it's a process we designed, but ultimately it's the first time you've done it.
I mean, obviously, I do get alarmed every time you talk about the cost going up.
I haven't mentioned that very much. But for what it's worth, I think unless we're doing a really in-depth event site, we're still roughly speaking in that bracket that I gave you initially.
Recorded that.
There are ways in which you could still choose to go that it could push it beyond that, but you're still a long way short of the. I don't think that I can't conceive right now if you're asking for anything that would push us to the previous quote you got. So that's still a positive, even if we are.
It was said in jest. No, I understand.
Sure.
The more we add in, the more expensive it gets. I guess.
Natural thing. Yeah. Okay, then great. Good to understand that. Otherwise, we'll speak to you guys later on the migration meeting. But yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Thanks very much for your time, Nick. Bye.